The first sound of the new day wasn't an alarm clock, and it damn sure wasn't a woman's warm voice. It was the creak of the old floorboards. My house spoke its own language, a tongue I'd learned over the half-century since I'd laid these planks myself. The third one from the bed always sang a high, mournful note, like it was sorry for breaking the morning quiet. The one by the dresser groaned, a low grumble like an old man's joints on a cold day. 72 years old. At this age, you stop chasing what's new and start cherishing what's predictable. This house, built on the same land my own father was born on, was the only honest conversation I had left. It was settling and groaning right along with me. We understood each other. Name's Harry. Just Harry. To the few neighbors still scattered through this Montana valley, I'm Old Man Harrison from the ranch that used to be. To the IRS, I'm a Social Security number. And to my kids, well, lately, I wasn't sure what I was to them. Time was, I was the owner of this ranch. Not a big spread by local standards, but it was honest work. I was up before the sun and in bed, long after the stars had laid out their diamond blanket across the sky. I didn't make millions. I didn't build an empire. But these hands, a roadmap of scars and calluses, they were the tuition for my kids' college diplomas. This back, the one that aches like hell before a storm, was the foundation they built their lives on, far away from the dust and the smell of cattle. I never sent them a bill. A man, a father, you just do what needs doing. No questions, no expecting a thank you note. I believed that like it was scripture. Folks, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button so more people can hear this story. Let us know what city you're tuning in from. On the kitchen calendar, the one with faded pictures of national parks my late wife Martha bought 20 years ago, October 17th was circled in red marker. My birthday. It was Martha's ritual, circling the important dates a month ahead of time. So life doesn't sneak up on you, she'd say with that warm smile of hers. I'd kept up the tradition after she was gone. A small thing, a thin thread connecting me to her, to a time when this house was filled with life. Maybe, deep down, I held on to the foolish, childish hope that the red circle had some kind of magic to it, that it could send a signal out to the noisy cities where my children lived and whisper, "Hey, you didn't forget, did you?" The morning flowed down its usual channel. Coffee, black as oil and twice as bitter, from the old enamel mug with the chip on the rim. A slice of yesterday's bread with a thick slab of butter. Buddy, my old Labrador mix, lying at my feet, lifted his graying muzzle. His brown eyes held a kind of quiet wisdom I hadn't seen in a human face for a long, long time. He was the only one who never forgot. His love was simple and absolute. A bowl of kibble, fresh water, and my hand scratching that spot behind his ears. In return, he gave me everything he had, every beat of his loyal heart. I went out to the porch and sat in my rocking chair. It greeted me with a familiar creak. The wind, smelling of dry grass and coming autumn, rustled the yellowing leaves on the lone maple in the yard. I set my phone on the railing. A black, shiny rectangle, an alien thing in this world of wood and stone. I stared at it like you'd watch a snake in the grass. Every 15 minutes or so, my hand would twitch, reaching for it. Check the signal. Full bars. Check the ringer. All the way up. Check for missed calls. The screen was blank. Empty. The sun crawled across the sky, measuring out the hours of my foolish hope. The morning chill gave way to the deceptive warmth of an Indian summer day. To keep my hands and my mind busy, I went out to fix a stretch of fence on the far pasture. My fingers found the right tools on their own. My muscles remembered the work. I stretched the wire taut, hammered in the staples, and every sharp crack of the hammer echoed a dull question in my head. Really? Again? If I'd known then, 40 years ago, hauling sacks of concrete for this house, that I'd end up being a ghost at my own family's table, present but invisible, I'd have bought myself a boat instead of helping them with the down payments on their houses. The thought was sharp and bitter. I swallowed it down like bad medicine. They'd forgotten last year, too. Called 2 days later. Sarah, my sweet girl, chirped into the phone about a completely crazy week at work and a project that just drained everything out of me. Michael, my pragmatic, ambitious son, mumbled something similar about his daughter's school play and a parent-teacher conference. I told them it was fine. That I understood. I always understood. It's fine. Those 2 words had become the thick walls of a prison I'd built around myself. I'd been silent for so long, I think I'd swallowed more than my soul could digest. By evening, as the sun began its lazy descent behind the hills, painting the sky in dramatic shades of orange and purple, my hope died. It didn't fade. It died. It left a cold, ringing vacuum in its place. This wasn't about being busy. It wasn't about projects or school plays. It was about being erased. Gently, quietly, I had been written out of their lives like a stray pencil mark on the margin of a page. I was an old house they no longer needed to visit. It was still standing. It was solid. But stopping by was a waste of a trip. The silence in the house became a physical presence. It pressed on my eardrums, filled my lungs. It screamed about my complete and utter solitude. I sat in my armchair in the living room, staring at the blank TV screen. My phone lay on the coffee table, a black mirrored coffin for my expectations. And in that deafening, soul-crushing quiet, a decision was born. It wasn't born of anger or self-pity. It arrived with the cold clarity of a winter dawn. I stood up. My legs obeyed slowly. In the bedroom, I pulled a dusty canvas rucksack from the top shelf of the closet, the one Martha and I used to take hiking in the mountains. It smelled of old campfires and memories. I threw in a change of clothes, a thick wool sweater, a thermos that still seemed to hold the warmth of her hands, and a bag of the jerky I'd made last week. On the kitchen table, under a horseshoe-shaped magnet, I left a short note. Gone to the lake. Who was I writing it for? Maybe the sheriff, in case he checked in on me in a week or so. Or maybe I was writing it for myself, to make this act, this escape, real. Buddy started whining at the door, sensing the change in the air. He danced around my feet, looking up at me, his eyes asking the question, "What about me? You're not leaving me." "No, pal, not this time. You stay and hold down the fort. Food and water are in your bowls. I won't be long." He nuzzled my hand with his wet nose. That simple, honest gesture of affection was like a balm on an open wound. The keys to my old Ford F-150 hung on a nail by the door. The truck was a part of me. The paint was scratched, the seat was torn. But its heart, a big V8 engine, beat steady and strong. It roared to life, the sound echoing off the walls of the empty house. Pulling out of the yard onto the dirt road, I took one last look in the rearview mirror. The windows of my home stared back at me like dark, vacant eyes. I felt no regret, only a hollowed-out resolve. I was heading for Flathead Lake, the place where kids' laughter used to echo off the water, the place where Martha taught them how to swim, the place where we were a family. I wasn't going to remember. I was going to say goodbye. Night doesn't creep in Montana. It drops like a black curtain. One moment there's a sky, the next there's nothing but the cone of light your headlights carve out of the darkness. The engine of my old Ford had settled from a roar into a low, steady rumble, a sound I knew better than my own heartbeat. The cab was filled with its timeless smell, a mix of trail dust, a faint hint of gasoline, and something else, something warm and familiar. The scent of decades of my life spent behind this wheel. Every mile of this highway was written over with memories, like the dog-eared pages of a favorite book. I was driving, but really, I was traveling through time. There was the long straightaway where Michael, all of 6 years old, begged to steer. I'd pulled him onto my lap, his tiny hands gripping the bottom of the huge steering wheel. He'd let out a shriek of pure joy when the truck swerved just a little. Martha, sitting beside us, had laughed. "Harry, you're going to be the death of me," she'd said. But her eyes weren't full of fear, just love. Then there was the turnoff for Green Valley, the one overgrown with wild raspberry bushes. We'd gotten a flat there one summer evening on the way home from the lake. A sudden downpour had opened up, cold and furious. I was wrestling with the jack and the spare, rain plastering my shirt to my back, while Michael, who was maybe 10 then, stood beside me, holding a flashlight almost as big as he was. "Dad," he'd said, his voice trembling a little from the cold, "you're like a superhero." His words had warmed me better than any fire. I felt it then. Indestructible, capable of fixing anything. A tire, a broken toy, a scraped knee. I was their shield against the world. Who knew that years later, that same shield would just be an old piece of junk cluttering up their lives? My thoughts drifted downriver, into murkier waters. Sarah's college years. She was always the smart one, our pride and joy. Got into a fancy university back east. Martha and I were so proud, you'd have thought we were the ones getting the degree. But the tuition bills arrived with the grim punctuality of an executioner. The last year was the toughest. A bad drought had hit the pastures, and the price of beef was in the gutter. On top of that, Martha was starting to get sick, and the medicine wasn't cheap. I'd sit at the kitchen table night after night, staring at the stack of bills, feeling the walls close in. That's when I made the decision. Red Baron, a champion-sired Hereford bull, the pride of my herd. Selling him was like selling off a piece of the family legacy. I'd helped birth him, raised him myself, poured all my knowledge and hopes into him. He wasn't just livestock, he was a symbol. I made the call to a buyer in Wyoming, haggling over a price that felt like a betrayal. When the stock truck pulled away with him in the back, I couldn't watch. I just stood there, turned away from the road, listening to the sound of the engine fade. I never told Sarah. Why worry her? I just wired the money to her account. She called, her voice bubbling with happiness. "Dad." "Oh, thank you. I was about to take out another loan. I don't know what I would have done without you." I stood by the empty pen, the ghost of his presence still heavy in the air, and said, "It's fine, sweetheart. You just focus on your studies." She never asked where the money came from, not because she was a bad person, just because she was used to her father being the one who solved problems. Quietly, no fuss. Then there was Michael, my ambitious, go-getter son. He had no interest in working the land. He was drawn to the bright lights of the city, to a world of deals and contracts. When he and his wife decided to build their first house in the suburbs, it was clear their budget was stretched thin. So I stepped in again. Every Friday evening, I'd climb into my Ford and make the 100-mile drive. Every Saturday and Sunday, I was there in my dusty work clothes, framing walls, laying subfloors, and hauling shingles up a ladder to the roof. My back screamed, but I kept my mouth shut. Michael would usually show up around noon with sandwiches and Cokes. He'd watch me for a minute, a strange mix of gratitude and superiority in his eyes. "Dad, you're a machine. I don't know how you do it." Sometimes his wife, Jennifer, would come out onto the porch. "Harry, don't you overdo it now," she'd say, and I could hear the polite distance in her voice, the gentle reminder that I was just the hired help who happened to be working for free. I once overheard her ask him in the kitchen, "Maybe we should give your dad some money for this. It feels weird." And Michael had answered, "Nah, he loves tinkering. It's a hobby for him." A hobby. 6 months of back-breaking labor was my hobby. At their housewarming party, surrounded by their fancy friends, Michael raised a glass to this beautiful home that Jen and I built with our own 2 hands. I was standing in a corner, and nobody even looked my way. I didn't correct him. Why ruin the party? I drove past the dim neon sign of Pete's Diner. It looked closed down, abandoned. The windows were dark. The parking lot was empty. But it used to be alive. We always stopped there. Burgers with crispy onions and milkshakes so thick you needed a spoon. The kids would get ketchup all over their faces, and Martha would laugh as she cleaned them up with a napkin. Now, it was just another ghost on a haunted road. The truck turned off the smooth highway and onto the familiar gravel road. The tires crunched, kicking up a cloud of dust that shimmered in the headlights. Up ahead, through the dark shapes of the pines, I saw the glint of water. The lake. It was reflecting the cold, distant light of a million stars. I had arrived, and the journey here, a few short hours, had felt like my whole life. A long road of work and sacrifice that ended in a cold, silent place under an indifferent sky. I killed the engine. The roar died, replaced by the deep silence of the wild. I stepped out of the cab. The air was cool and clean, smelling of pine needles, damp earth, and something else. Freedom. Far across the water, a loon let out a long, lonely call. The sound didn't hurt. In fact, it harmonized with the ache inside me. And in that harmony, there was a strange kind of peace. I stood there on the shore, alone with my thoughts. But for the first time all day, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The first light of morning was a cold, pearly gray. I woke up in my sleeping bag in the bed of the truck, not to an alarm, but to the bone-deep chill and the crystal silence, broken only by the occasional call of a waking bird. A thick fog was rolling across the lake, making the water look like a bowl of milk. I lit my little gas stove, and its hiss seemed like the loudest sound in the universe. I brewed coffee right in my mug, strong, fragrant, and real. Huddled in an old blanket on the tailgate of my Ford, I watched the sun begin to burn through the fog, tinting it with soft pinks and golds. The tension I'd carried in my shoulders for years, a weight that felt like it had fused to my bones, began to slowly melt away. Out here, by the water, everything was simple and honest. The rocks were rocks. The water was water. There were no hidden meanings, no unspoken resentments. The world was just what it was. I dug out my old bamboo fishing rod, a relic from my father. I baited the hook with an earthworm I found under the damp moss at the base of a pine and cast the line. The bright red and white bobber plopped into the water and then stood at attention, a lone sentinel on duty. I sat on a large, sun-bleached log and waited. I wasn't waiting for a fish, not really. I was just watching the water, listening to the quiet and breathing. For the first time in years, I took a full, deep breath that didn't feel heavy. Time lost all meaning. It was measured now by the slow climb of the sun, the shifting of shadows on the water. I caught a couple of decent bass, and one beautiful rainbow trout, its scales shimmering in the sun. I cleaned them on a flat granite rock at the water's edge, rinsing them in the icy lake. I built a small fire, and soon the smell of wood smoke and frying fish filled the air. It was the smell of my boyhood, of simple, honest pleasure. I ate the fish right off the willow stick I'd cooked it on, burning my fingers and not even caring. It was the best meal I'd had in years. It was in that moment of fragile, hard-won peace that the modern world came crashing back in. From the rucksack in the cab of the truck, my phone began to buzz. The sharp, jarring vibration was a sacrilege in this cathedral of quiet. I flinched as if I'd been shocked. Reluctantly, I walked to the truck. The name on the screen glowed. Michael. My heart did a painful flip. Could it be? Had they remembered? Was shame finally knocking on their door? That stupid, stubborn hope I'd been trying to drown all day bobbed back to the surface. Hello? My voice was rough, hoarse from disuse. Dad, finally. What the hell, where are you? Michael's voice wasn't apologetic. It was sharp with impatience, bordering on anger. I'm at the lake, I said calmly, my eyes fixed on the motionless bobber. The lake? Are you kidding me? We've been going nuts here. Gone to the lake? What kind of stunt is this? You're 72, not 12. I said nothing. Each word was a deliberate jab. Dad, are you listening to me? You need to get back to the city. Right now. We're refinancing the mortgage, and we need your signature as the guarantor. The lawyer is waiting. The guarantor. Not the father. Not a person. A guarantor. The land my house stood on was just a line item in their loan agreement. I can't come back today, Michael. What do you mean you can't? Dad, stop this nonsense. This is important. This is for your grandkids' future. There was a rustle on the line, and Michael's harsh tone was replaced by Sarah's, syrupy and sweet. Daddy? Hi, sweetie. We were so worried when we saw your note. You just vanished. We were going to call you yesterday, of course, to wish you a happy birthday. But it was just the craziest week. You know how it is. The lie was so lazy, so clumsy. It was almost more insulting than the forgetting itself. Anyway, she went on, Michael's right. We just need your signature. It's just a formality. Please, Daddy, don't make this complicated. We'll send a car for you if you want. Don't make this complicated. The phrase hit me harder than Michael's anger. My entire life, all I had ever done was uncomplicate things for them. I'd uncomplicated college by selling my prize bull. I'd uncomplicated their first home by breaking my back. I'd uncomplicated their lives by swallowing their neglect. And now, the one day I had taken for myself, I was the one making things complicated. Then Michael, who must have snatched the phone back, delivered the final blow. Look, Dad, let's just cut the crap, he said, his voice turning cold and flat, the voice he must use in his business dealings. That ranch of yours is just sitting there. You're getting old. The place is falling apart. For us, it's a frozen asset, a dead weight. We need to move forward. So either you're with us, or you're in the way. It's not personal. It's just business. It's just business. Something inside of me snapped. It was a loud, clean sound, like a thick cable under too much tension finally giving way. The pain vanished. The hurt evaporated. In its place was a ringing, cold, absolute clarity. I looked at my reflection in the dark water. An old man, gray hair, a face carved with a map of a long life. But the eyes were different. The sad, hopeful dog was gone. In its place was something cold as steel. I understood. They hadn't just forgotten my birthday. They had forgotten me. I had ceased to exist as a person, as their father. I had been downgraded to a function, a legal complication attached to a valuable asset. I was an old, rotting barn on their property, standing in the way of a new development. I straightened my back. "I'll think about it," I said, and the voice that came out was a stranger's. It was calm, steady, and utterly foreign. "I'll be in town tomorrow." "Good," Michael said, the relief in his voice palpable. "I'll text you the address of the law office. And don't be late, Dad. Time is money." He hung up. I stood there on the shore for a long time, the dead phone still in my hand. The snap inside me had settled into a low, powerful hum. It was the sound of an engine turning over, a dormant volcano waking up. I wasn't going to get revenge. Revenge is for the weak. I was going to get justice. Quietly, firmly, like a man. I carefully doused the fire, packed my few belongings. My vacation was over. It was time to get to work. Driving back to the city, I felt like a different man. The road was the same, the truck was the same, but I was seeing the world through new eyes. The fog of hurt in my head had burned away. I wasn't replaying their words, wasn't wallowing in self-pity. My mind was sharp and clear, clicking through facts and figures like an adding machine. I pictured the receipts for lumber for Michael's house, the bank statement showing the wire transfer to Sarah's college, the deed to the land. I'd spent a lifetime leading with my heart. It was time to lead with my head. I ignored the address Michael had texted me, some glass and steel tower downtown. Instead, I drove to a quiet, tree-lined street in an older part of the city, where the houses still had character. I pulled up to a neat brick house with a perfect lawn. This was Jim Callahan's place. We'd been friends since we were kids. He'd become a lawyer. I'd become a rancher. He was retired now, but his mind was as sharp as ever. More importantly, Jim was old school. To him, words like honor and justice weren't just words. They were a code to live by. He opened the door himself, wearing a plaid flannel shirt and worn-out loafers. "Harry, what brings you out here? You look like you've been to war." "Just about, Jim," I said, shaking his strong, dry hand. "I need your advice, and not as a friend, as a lawyer." We sat in his study, a sanctuary that smelled of old leather, books, and pipe tobacco. I laid it all out for him. No emotion, no complaints, just the facts. The forgotten birthday, the phone call, the demand for my signature, Michael's parting shot about business. Jim listened without a word, his fingers steepled on his desk, his gaze sharp and penetrating from under his bushy gray eyebrows. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, just tapping his fingers on the polished wood of his desk. Then he turned to me, his eyes hard. "Harry, first things first. They're lying to you. Whether it's out of ignorance or on purpose, it's a lie. Your name on that deed is not a formality. You are the sole and undisputed owner. That is your land, your house. Without your signature, they can't do a damn thing. You're not a pawn on the board, Harry. They've just forgotten you're the king. I don't want to go to war with my own kids, Jim." "You didn't start this war," he said, his voice firm. "They crossed a line you don't cross. They looked at their father and saw an obstacle. If you back down now, you won't be buying their love. You'll be signing a permission slip for them to keep walking all over you. You won't just lose the ranch. You'll lose the last thing you've got left, your self-respect." His words were like a bucket of ice water. He was saying everything I was too afraid to admit to myself. "What do I do?" "You act, firmly and fairly. First, we draft an official, legally airtight refusal to their bank's request. Second, we set up a revocable living trust. You transfer the entire property, ranch, house, everything, into this trust. You will be the sole trustee. That means you, and only you, can make any decisions about that land. Sell it, lease it, raise llamas on it if you want. Your will stays the same. They inherit it when you're gone. But until that day, their hands are tied. Legally, they will never be able to come at you with one of their business propositions again. Is it complicated? For me, it's a few hours' work, Jim said, already pulling a thick file folder from his shelf. For you, Harry, you have one job. You call a meeting. Not in their fancy high-rise. On your terms. A neutral ground. And you tell them exactly what you told me. You look them in the eye. And you speak. No yelling. Just quiet, steady, and in control. Like the man who owns his own life. I left Jim's house feeling like a mountain had been lifted off my shoulders. The weight of doubt and hurt was gone. I was no longer a victim of circumstance. I was a player, about to make my move. I called Michael. I'm in town. I'm not going to the lawyer's office. Meet me in an hour. Pete's Diner. What? Dad, what is this game? Why? 1 hour. I cut him off. You and Sarah. No spouses. I'll be waiting. I hung up. Pete's Diner smelled of fried onions and stale coffee. I took the back booth, the one with the cracked red vinyl, our old booth. I ordered a black coffee. They showed up 15 minutes later. Michael was wound tight, his neck splotchy and red. Sarah looked pale and worried. They slid into the booth across from me. Michael slapped a leather portfolio of documents onto the table between us. Dad, I don't know what this little dramatic scene is about, he said through his teeth. But we're on a deadline. I took a slow sip of my coffee. I looked at Michael. Then I looked at Sarah. My anger had burned itself out, leaving behind nothing but a cold steel rod where my spine used to be. I'm glad you could make it, I said, my voice even and calm. I won't be signing those. Michael froze. Sarah gasped. What do you mean you won't sign? Do you have any idea what? No, son. It's you who doesn't have any idea. I interrupted, holding up a hand. I listened to you yesterday. Today, you're going to listen to me. Sarah, I said, turning to her, you remember how you paid for your last semester of college? You think that money just fell out of the sky? I sold Red Baron, the pride of our ranch. I didn't tell you because your job was to study. My job was to make sure you could. Sarah put a hand to her mouth, her eyes welling up. Michael, I said, turning to him, your house. You remember who framed the walls? Who put the roof on? I spent 14 weekends of my life on your construction site. For free. Not because it was my hobby, but because you are my son. I looked at both of them. They sat there, deflated, like children who'd been caught. I did that and 100 other things. Not because it was just business. I did it because I am your father. And yesterday, on my birthday, I didn't get a phone call. I got an ultimatum. You decided that my legacy already belonged to you. You were mistaken. So, let's talk business, since that's a language you understand. I let the silence hang in the air. The ranch is mine, and mine alone. It is no longer collateral for your ambitions. As of today, the entire property is in a trust, and I am the sole trustee. That's the end of it. Legally, it's airtight. You will get what's yours when I'm dead, and not a day sooner. I looked at their stunned, bewildered faces. One more thing, I said, standing up and pulling a few crumpled bills from my pocket. I'm putting the south pasture up for sale next week. I've always wanted to buy a decent boat. Maybe take a fishing trip to Alaska. Seems like now is the perfect time. I laid the money on the table for the coffee and walked out without a backward glance. My back was straight. I didn't slam the door. I just left. I wasn't burning a bridge. I was building a dam to make damn sure the river of their selfishness never flooded my life again. I didn't go straight back to the ranch. The wheels of my old Ford seemed to have a mind of their own, and they took me back to the lake. I returned to the exact same spot, but the feeling was entirely different. I hadn't run here out of desperation. I had come here as a victor returns to a battlefield, to quietly survey his victory in the silence. The phone didn't ring for days. I could picture the storm raging in the city, the shock, the anger, the frantic calls to their lawyers, trying to find a loophole in my defenses. But it all felt a world away. I was here. I fished. I built a fire. I read a tattered paperback I found in the glove compartment, and I breathed. Just breathed. Freely. After a week, I went home. The house greeted me with its familiar creaks, but now they didn't sound like weeping. They sounded like music. The music of my fortress. The first thing I did was clear out the garage. I dug through decades of junk until I reached the back wall. And there it was, under a thick, dusty tarp, my unfinished dream. A wooden boat, the one my father and I had started building when I was just a teenager. His heart attack, and then my own life, a wife, a family, a ranch to run, had put that dream on hold for 50 years. I pulled off the tarp. A cloud of dust exploded into the air. The cedar hull was dry and the seams had separated in places, but the bones were good, solid. I ran my hand over the rough, unfinished wood, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I smiled a real, honest-to-God smile. I had a project, something that was mine. The months that followed fell into a new rhythm, one filled with purpose and a quiet joy. I'd wake at dawn, and after my coffee, I'd head out to the garage. I worked slowly, savoring every step. I sanded the old planks until they were smooth as silk. I worked hot linseed oil into the wood, and the garage filled with the smell of sunshine and summer. I carved new pieces to replace the rotten ones. I caulked and sanded and applied coat after coat of deep cherry red varnish. I'd turn on the old radio, and with the lonely sound of a country singer on the air, my boat was slowly, patiently, coming back to life. I stopped waiting for the phone to ring. I stopped checking for messages. I was too busy building something. One evening, Jim showed up with a bottle of good bourbon. We sat on the porch in my rocking chairs and watched the sun go down. "Well, old soldier, how goes the war?" he asked, handing me a glass. "The war's over, Jim," I said, nodding toward the garage, where the setting sun glinted off the freshly varnished hull. "This here is peacetime." "Heard from them?" he asked. "Nope, it's for the best. They need time to think. So do I." "You taught them the most important lesson they'll ever learn, Harry," Jim said, taking a sip of his bourbon. "A lesson they didn't get in those fancy colleges. Sometimes, to appreciate something, you have to lose it, or at least understand it was never really yours to begin with." I finished the boat in the spring. I rolled her out of the garage and into the sunlight. She was beautiful. I proudly screwed a brass plaque to her stern, one I'd had specially made in town. It read, "The Martha." I launched her on the calm water of the lake. When I pushed off from the shore, and she slid silently across the glassy surface, I felt a sense of peace so profound it almost brought me to my knees. I was alone in a boat in the middle of a vast lake, surrounded by mountains and sky, and I was not lonely. I was whole. I kept my word. I sold that south pasture to a young rancher just starting out, and with the money, I flew to Alaska. I saw glaciers the color of blue fire. I saw grizzly bears swatting salmon from rushing rivers. I saw whales breaching in the cold, gray ocean. I spent a month just drifting, talking to fishermen and loggers and other simple, hard-working folks whose lives were as real as the landscape around them. I realized how small my world had become, walled in by my ranch and my resentments. One evening, after I'd returned, I was out in my boat on the lake. The sun was setting, turning the water to liquid gold. My phone rang. Sarah. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I took a slow breath and answered. Hello? Dad? Hi. Her voice was quiet, hesitant. How are you? I'm good, sweetheart. I'm real good. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for everything, for the birthday, for all of it. There was no act in her voice, just a deep, bone-weary sadness and what sounded like genuine regret. I know, I said quietly. We talked for a few more minutes, about the weather, about her kids. She asked about my boat. It was a clumsy, stumbling conversation, but it was a real one. I don't know what will happen next. Maybe, in time, this will be the start of something new. Something built on respect instead of habit and obligation. Or maybe not. But it doesn't matter as much anymore. My peace is no longer tied to their apologies. It's here, with me, in this boat. It's in the quiet creak of the oarlocks, in the whisper of the wind, in the gentle lap of water against the hull. I watched the last sliver of sun disappear behind the mountains, and I knew. I had reclaimed not just my ranch. I had reclaimed my life, and there were a hell of a lot more quiet evenings like this one still to come.